We're just after the White and Kong exercises with the Sri Lankan group. We're just after the White and Kong exercises with the Sri Lankan group.
Well, thank you, Sister, for your very inspiring and heartfelt speech, which I'm sure was very much appreciated. Indeed, I think all of our speakers today have taken us on a journey back to the natural world and reminded us, even if for a moment, that nature and man are one. And even though we can't change the world, we can change ourselves and our own habits, and perhaps that might be a nice thought to take away with us today. Before we close though, just a reminder that the next meeting will be a public lecture here at the Adja Theatre at 5 p.m. entitled Buddhism, a Religion, a Philosophy or a Way of Life, and it will be presented by the
Prodigy, brothers, sisters and friends. Before we proceed, I'd like to use a bit of sign language. I don't speak Malayalam or Hindi or Marathi or other regional languages in India, only English. If you have a cell phone, would you kindly switch it off, please? I would like to warmly welcome members of the public to this public lecture at this year's International Convention of the Theosophical Society. Our speaker this evening is Venerable Orlandi Ananda Tiara. He has quite a list of biographical information, so I've taken the liberty of choosing a number of points. He was born in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. He studied economic sociology at the University of Amsterdam in Holland. He was ordained in Sri Lanka in 1975 and received a higher ordination, Buddhist ordination, in 1977, also in Sri Lanka. Between 1979 and 1984, he was resident teacher at Rock Hill International Meditation Centre near Kandy, Sri Lanka. From 1982 until now, he has been a Buddhist delegate to Interreligious Living Dialogue held in Germany, Sri Lanka, India, Bali, Japan, Pakistan, France, and I understand elsewhere as well. From 1985 until 1997, he was abbot of Kotawa Nagaranya Rainforest Hermitage near Galle in Sri Lanka. Since 1997, he has been connected to and resident teacher at Pagoda Van Han, a Vietnamese temple in Holland. He is a member of INEB, that is International Network of Engaged Buddhists, and also INEB Netherlands. He's a member of the advisory board of the Mandala project of Tibet House, New Delhi in India. He has taught meditation in various countries, including Holland, Germany, France, Australia, Indonesia, South Africa, and the Himalayas. Since 1997, he has been resident meditation teacher at the Pagoda Meditation Center in Sri Lanka. The title of his lecture this evening is Buddhism, a Religion, a Philosophy, or a Way of Life. I now invite Venerable Orlandi Ananda Tiara to address us.
Good evening, respected International President of the Theosophical Society, Radhaji, and dear friends, brothers and sisters. The title of my talk is Buddhism, a Religion, a Philosophy, or a Way of Life. I think that Buddhism can be seen as a combination of all these three aspects. It is a religion in the sense that there is a founder, Gautama the Buddha, Prince Siddhartha, who became enlightened. There are scriptures, the Tipitaka or Tripitaka. Then there is an order of ordained bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, Buddhist monks and nuns, and also lay followers called Upasaka, Upasika. And there are temples with their rites and rituals, with their preachings, their teachings, their meditation centers. So really, Buddhism in that sense is a religion, but it is not exactly the same as most other theistic religions. It's a non-theistic religion where Buddha has put emphasis on the role of the human being rather than having God at the center of everything. So therefore it is a non-theistic religion, and it is also not a religion in the sense of the word religiare, which would mean to bind together again of the soul with its source or with the Creator. The Buddha apparently has smiled at the question, if there is a Creator God, he would keep silent and smiled. Then when he was asked, well, in that case, is there no God, Creator? And he smiled and kept silent. Then he was asked, why do you smile and keep silent? And he said, well, if I would say there is a Creator God, some people might accuse me of being an eternalist. And if I say there's no God, some people would criticize me for being an annihilationist or a nihilist. So he would like to avoid those extreme views and have a middle path, maybe no view kind of attitude. So Buddhism actually started already developing during the life of the Buddha, when he had his enlightenment, as you know, under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, what is Bihar nowadays, and went on foot to Varanasi, Sarnath, to the deer park, and found his 5 companions with whom he had been practicing ascetic practices for many years, and which he had abandoned. And after his enlightenment he thought, who in this world would actually be able to understand this subtle truth? And he realized that his teachers, who had taught him the deepest levels and the highest levels of meditation, had already passed away. And then with his sort of divine vision, he realized that his 5 companions would be there in the deer park in Sarnath, and he went there to share his discovery of the highest Dhamma that he had discovered with them. And that was called the first talk of the Buddha, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, or the teaching on the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dharma. So that is actually where Buddhism started, as almost like an organized religion, although it didn't have any temples as yet. But later on, when there were more people joining and following the Buddha and listening to his Dharma, there was actually an order of Buddhist monks started. At the very time of his first sermon, if you'd like to call it, or his first Dharma talk, there was one of these 5 disciples who immediately understood what he said when he said, Sabbe sankhara anicca, all conditioned things are impermanent. And one of them, called Kondanya, realized the deeper truth of that and immediately got enlightened. So he is supposed to be one who got enlightened by hearing, just by hearing. And others would have to ask questions, think about it, meditate on it, and through Dhamma discussions come to a better understanding, and maybe then later on realize that higher truth. But anyhow, this event of the Dhammacakkappavattana, the setting in motion of the wheel of Dharma, could be considered the beginning of Buddhism. And next year, May and June, actually the full month of July, it is 2,600 years ago that the Buddha gave that talk. So then, after the followers had reached stages of sainthood, there are, and I will talk about this a little bit later, what is called stages of sainthood, or stages on the path. Now, the theme of this international convention being light on the path, we will also have to talk a little bit about the Buddha's path and the stages on the path. But there were followers who reached different stages, and the final stage was called Arahathood. And when they become an Arahat, they're completely free from greed, hatred, and delusion, Lobha, Dosa, and Moha, or Lobha, Dvesha, and Moha. And when there were 60 Arahats in this world, the Buddha actually sent them in all different directions, to 60 different directions, each one by themselves, for the welfare of the many, for the happiness of the many. Bahu Jana Hitaya, Bahu Jana Sukhaya, as it is called in Hindi also, and in Sanskrit, Pali. So that is why the Buddhism could be even called a missionary religion, in that sense that the Buddha sent his own disciples in different directions, not so much to convert others, but for the welfare and happiness of the many. And Buddhism actually takes pride in saying over and over again that in the history of Buddhism, not a single drop of blood was shed in the name of Buddhism and the spread of Buddhism. It is all just like voluntary acceptance of the teachings of the Buddha. And the Buddha himself actually has said to the Kalamas, that was a group of people, you could say a tribe in that area, who were quite intellectually advanced, and the Buddha said, please don't accept anything just because the majority of people believe it, or because it is written in the scriptures, or even because I tell you. But if you, after thinking about it, realize that it is not against reason, and it is good for yourself and for others, and it leads towards liberation from suffering, and leads to dispassion and peace and happiness, then when you're convinced, then you can accept it. So that was called the Kalama Sutta, or the teaching to the Kalamas, in which the Buddha asked people not to even just blindly believe what he himself was teaching. So then we have the Buddha, his teachings, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns. And actually speaking, it seems to have been the first bhikkhuni order in this world, or maybe in this cycle of this world, in the history of religion, that women also had a chance to get ordained. And it was actually the foster mother of the Buddha himself, and also the ladies from the Sakyan court who came walking, you would call it a demonstration nowadays, and pleading with the Buddha to give ordination to the women. So it was maybe one of the first women liberation movements in the true sense of the word in this world. So the liberation, of course, from suffering, basically, because the enlightened ones had his teachings actually summarized. Yesterday, I think Sanne Chong said the shortest formulation was the Four Noble Truths, but when the Buddha said, if you really want to sum it up, I teach only two things, and that is dukkha and the way out of dukkha. So that is suffering, or maybe a better translation of the word dukkha would be unsatisfactoriness of all conditioned existence. That's a long term, but if you say unsatisfactoriness would be a more satisfactory translation than suffering. Because if you say birth is suffering, growing up is suffering, getting sick is suffering, to get what you don't want is suffering, and not to get what you want is suffering, to be separated from those and those situations and people whom you love is suffering, and even getting sick is suffering, and dying is suffering, well, then of course the Pope may have been right in saying that Buddhism is a negative and pessimistic religion. But if you look at the Buddha statues and the face of the Buddha, which of course came much later than the Buddha himself, but he has not a long face, he has a smile, and peaceful smile on his face. So if he were a pessimist, he would look quite different. So therefore the translation of dukkha is probably better to say unsatisfactoriness. And what is so unsatisfactory in this existence of this human world, and even the animal world, and even the world of the gods, the devas and the brahmas in different levels of existence? As you may know, Buddhism explains the universe more or less divided into 6 realms: the human realm, the animal realm, the deva realm, the brahma realm, the preta realm, or the realm of the hungry ghosts, and also the suffering realms called dukkhata or narakadi. So those levels of existence, if you want to split them up further, in Buddhism we come to 31 levels of existence, which is seen as cyclical, through which beings are going from life to life, from birth to death, and then on to rebirth in different levels of existence. They are not necessarily different planets or different geographical locations where you go and are reborn, but it could very well be that a person who passes away in a very high state of mind, in absorption and peace and happiness, may live on, at least their, what we call the stream of consciousness, in a level that is called Deva Loka, or the heavenly abodes, several of different kinds of heavenly abodes. So that is also called a kind of rebirth. But even that, according to the Buddha, is not an eternal heaven where one would stay forever and ever, but it is also a temporary abode, and not worth as the final aspiration for our spiritual destination, but rather seen as a kind of, well, you could say, a waiting room where you can enjoy the bliss of heavenly existence, but after which the karma that one has created in previous lives would catch up and then would be determining the next existence, maybe in a lower realm or possibly in the human realm. I think this is slightly contradictory to the Theosophical teachings where one is progressing once one has become a human being and going up and up in the scale of further evolution. But according to Buddhism, as far as I have understood, it is still possible for a human being to go up and down in the ladder of these different levels of existence. For example, there were people in the time of the Buddha who had an idea that if you would behave as a cow, C-O-W, you would go to a certain kind of heaven. If you walk like a cow, you moo like a cow, you behave like a cow, then you would go to a certain heaven. And there was another school that was called the bovine school of thought. There were other people who thought if you behave like a dog and eat like a dog and bark like a dog and so on, behave like a dog, then you would be born in another kind of heaven. And some people who were followers of those teachers had their doubts, fortunately, and they came to the Buddha and said, "Is that really true?" The Buddha said, "No, if you behave like a dog and behave like a cow and you have that kind of habit, then you would be born as a dog or as a cow." So actually there is a possibility, according to the behavior and the thoughts that we have, the intentions and the karma that we create, that one could actually go down in one's level. And one of the things that Buddha also said regarding the caste system, which was in a state of corruption at the time of the Buddha, that once a Brahmin, always a Brahmin, and no vertical mobility, the Buddha said no, one is, even though one is born like a Brahmin, one is not necessarily always a Brahmin. One is a Brahmin by one's thoughts, words, and deeds. And therefore, the Buddha gave great emphasis on human beings actually being able to create their own karma. In one of the talks also it came to be said that how important it is to make the right choices, and that is actually what we can do only from moment to moment as a human being. The responsibility for a human being to choose to do this or to do that, or to do it in this way or in another way, to choose for the good and to try to avoid the unskillful or evil actions, and then of course to purify the mind would come after that. That is another summing up of the Buddha's teachings, namely to try and avoid evil, to try and promote the good, and to purify one's mind. Sabba papassa akaranang kusalassa upasampada sattitta paryodapanang etang buddhanusasanam. That is all the teaching of all the Buddhas, apparently in a very short summing up. So when the Buddhism started spreading, and especially when Emperor Ashoka, who was originally, at the beginning of his reign, a rather cruel emperor, Chanda Ashoka, converted to Buddhism, became a follower of the Buddha and a practicing Buddhist, he actually is one of the main causes for the spreading of Buddhism all around Bharata, this whole area, his empire. 84,000 temples and stupas were built by Emperor Ashoka, and he then became called Dhamma Ashoka, the righteous Ashoka. So the teachings of the Buddha, his Dhamma, had been done actually from the age of 35, as you may know. He left the palace at the age of 29. He grew up in luxury He was the son of a Maharaja, but he went to an extreme of asceticism for 6 years and learning under the highest teachers the highest forms of yoga and meditation that were available at that time, leading him to be able to get his mind into dhyanas or jhanas and what is called absorptions, deep levels of concentration, and also the development of psychic powers such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, and remembering of previous lives, reading the mind of other people, and maybe being able to appear in 2 or more places, bilocation as it is called. Those kind of things he learned, but he realized at a certain point, namely just before his own enlightenment, that these states of mind that were begotten through the practice of this concentration type of meditation were still in the field of the conditioned. The mind was being conditioned by the practices of this tranquility meditation, or what we call samatha bhavana, that gives some peace of mind, but as Krishna ji used to say, J. Krishnamurti, it may give only a piece of the mind, but not real peace of mind, if you see the difference. You see, so that suppression of thought and the creation of a temporary state of suspension of thought and of deep, peaceful and strong mind was not, according to the Buddha discovery, the final destination of his spiritual aspiration. There must be something else, he said, beyond this, which he wanted to discover. And that is why at the Niranjana river near Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree, he actually decided not to get up from his seat till he found it. And at that stage, actually, he discovered that which was beyond what is called the unconditioned, or the asankata dharma, as it is called. And there he found that because he had been in this cycle of birth and rebirth for so many lifetimes, of course, as a bodhisattva, he had the aspiration to reach what is called Samma Sambuddhahood, or full enlightenment, by the development of good qualities, what are called the paramitas, such as, we say, what they call sila, that is morality, the sharing, dana, and the development of wisdom, of compassion, of patience, and all the good qualities, and also helping other people throughout many lifetimes. That's why he was called a bodhisattva, and even up till the moment of his enlightenment he was still called bodhisattva, an enlightened being, or a being on the way to full enlightenment. But from that moment of his full enlightenment, which happened at the age of 35 under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, he became a fully enlightened being who could also teach the path, so to speak, to others. And actually the Buddha uses the word path in the Eightfold Noble Path, or the Noble Eightfold Path, the Arya Attangika Magga, or Marga in Sanskrit, Magga in Pali. Karma in Sanskrit and Kamma in Pali. There's great similarity between the two languages. Usually when there's an R, then it is Sanskrit. When there's double M, it is Pali. Pali is a sort of simplified form, you could say, of Sanskrit. Anyhow, the word marga or magga, path, is definitely there. And so we have to try to shed some light on the path towards enlightenment also, which we will come to in a little while. Anyhow, the teachings were going on for 45 years, because the Buddha got enlightened at the age of 35, and he reached what is called parinibbana, or his final passing away, at the age of 80. And in the meantime, kings and bankers and various people supported the Sangha in the form of giving lands and building temples, especially during what is called the rainy season, the monsoon time, from July to October. The monks and nuns were supposed to stay in one place, intensify their study, the practice, and the preaching, and people were supporting them. So it became actually a kind of organized religion with followers, monks, nuns, and monasteries and teachings. So after the growing of the Sangha, it had spread in so many directions. So can we say that the Dhamma is a religion only? Or if it is a philosophy, what kind of philosophy is it? Because it seems that some philosophies remain sort of floating in the air and don't have both feet on the ground and are rather theoretical and not very practical. Whereas it seems to me that Buddha's philosophy is very high in the form of what is called, as Sanny Chong also mentioned, in the Abhidhamma, the higher philosophy, psychology of Buddhism. You find very high type of psychology and philosophy, but it also has both feet on the ground in the sense that it is very practical. One can do something with it, and finding a way for oneself to overcome especially dukkha or unsatisfactoriness, especially in cases where we are actually the creator of our own unsatisfactoriness, our own dukkha. There is something called dukkha, that is the suffering like pain when you have a wound or an immediate kind of thing that happens to you that is really shocking and physically painful also, then it is a dukkha. But there's another kind of dukkha that comes from the fact that things are changing, parinama dukkha. That is the sorrow that we experience when, somebody is suddenly dying, or we are being separated from people and situations whom we love, and or when we are confronted with people and situations whom we don't love. So because of those changes, and not only because of those changes, but probably more because we don't accept the change, we don't want to see the change, we don't acknowledge the change, we sort of hang on to the old situation. That is probably because of our attachment, our grasping, and sometimes our craving also. Craving would be for something more, and attachment would be to what we already have. And that is one of the main causes, if you look at the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, of our own suffering, that we don't see the reality as it is. That is called moha, sometimes maya, you could say, moha or avidya, that is usually translated as ignorance and not knowing. Now that, of course, needs a little bit of explanation also, because one could say if one doesn't know mathematics, or you don't know geography, or you don't know about the situation in the world, that you are an ignoramus and not somebody who doesn't know anything. Or if you haven't read anything, then some people say, oh, he doesn't know anything. But that is not what is meant by ignorance in the Buddhist terminology. Ignorance would be not to see the things as they really are. And that is not to be, superseded by or not to be conquered by an accumulation of a lot of knowledge or information, what is called. We can go to school and we can go to the university. We might even attend a course in philosophy, but still we may even have a degree in Buddhology and still be called ignorant in the Buddhist sense, because knowledge is different, as hopefully you know, from wisdom. And wisdom starts where knowledge ends. As Krishnamurti again used to say, the Advaita, the Vedanta philosophy, Veda, Anta, the end of knowledge. So where knowledge ends, wisdom starts. And the Vedantins probably spent 12 years studying Sanskrit and the Vedas, and in the end they discovered that wisdom starts where knowledge ends. And Krishnamurti used to say scathingly, well, couldn't they have discovered that at the beginning? Spending all that time studying and then in the end realizing that it's not in the knowledge but rather in the wisdom. So the Buddha actually gave very interesting, a subdivision of different stages of knowledge and wisdom. He said there is one kind of wisdom, prajna, which comes from hearing. Like Kondanya, the first monk of his 5 disciples, who immediately understood, well, he got liberation, moksha or nirvana, he realized, just by hearing the teachings of the Buddha in that very short sentence. All conditioned things are temporary or changing, impermanent. And the other sentence was, sabbe sankhara dukkha, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. So that is one kind of knowledge or wisdom that we can hear from wise people by listening to wise words, for instance, words of wisdom. Or we could read wisdom books. The problem sometimes with wisdom talks is that they go in one ear and straight out the other. And very little remains in between the ears, so to speak, in the grey mass of our brains. So we tend to forget what those wisdom words were. And that is actually a weakness of what is called suttamaya prajna, the wisdom which comes from hearing. So if you say, afterwards, how was the talk? Oh, it was a very good talk. Very good talk. Then you might ask, and what did he say? Maybe 90% of it has already gone. So that is the problem with suttamaya prajna, or wisdom arising from hearing. Therefore, the Buddha said there's another kind of level where we have to investigate the truth and the Dhamma by, for instance, Dhamma discussion with somebody who knows more about it than oneself, having Dhamma discussions, and even to investigate the Dhamma within oneself. That is called Dhamma Vicaya, the investigation of the Dhamma. But even that sometimes leads only to maybe better understanding, perhaps right view, and kind of intellectual better knowledge of the Dhamma, but not necessarily to what is called real insight wisdom. That is yet another stage of wisdom, and that apparently comes from what is called insight meditation, or vipassana bhavana, or the use of what is called mindfulness or awareness or attention. The development of mindfulness is the major way towards prajna or wisdom according to the Buddha. So then we could say, Buddhism, is it then perhaps a way of life also? If it is, a religion, and is it a philosophy, but is it also a way of life? And one could say yes, because in this Eightfold Noble Path, for instance, one finds teachings on sila or morality, samadhi, the development of the mind, concentration and mindfulness, and also prajna or wisdom. And then to put that into one's daily life, because it is not only theoretical and high-flown philosophy, but also with some very practical instructions, even ways of, for instance, how to use your money. Buddha said, don't spend all your money, spend it partly for your own needs, partly save it, partly invest it, partly give it to the beggars, and partly reserve it for the thieves also, just in case. You see, the Buddha was having no dogma. He was very practical and said to his followers, Dittincha anupagamma silava. That means ditti is drishti, or view, or concept, or idea. Don't cling to ideas or concepts. And that is a very great thing that the Buddha said, where Buddhism became like a free thinker's philosophy and religion, where one is not, like in Theosophy also, when it is ideally practiced, one doesn't cling to ideas or dogma or theories. And another thing that is very practical is the development of qualities such as karuna, metta, mudita, and upekkha. That is compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So compassion can also be practiced in action, like we have with the Animal Welfare Society, for instance, and other kind of compassionate acts towards the sick, the poor, the elderly, the have-nots, and so on. So that is a very good practice that one can actually do in one's daily life. Maitri or metta is a kind of love that a mother has for her child, naturally. And that kind of feeling for one's child should be, according to the Buddha, spread to all other beings. That is called universal loving kindness or unconditional love for all beings. That is humans, animals, the visible, the invisible, the near, the far, in all directions. And even to people with whom you have a big problem. It can be developed in stages even towards oneself. There are people who hate themselves, who cannot be friendly or loving to themselves. Not in a selfish way, but they don't accept themselves sometimes. For that also, metta bhavana, the development of loving kindness, can be practiced. And if one cannot develop it towards oneself, it is very difficult to develop it towards others. So the Buddha gave a gradual, you could say, path of developing loving kindness until it becomes all-encompassing. And what is called sympathetic joy as a good quality, it is the opposite of jealousy. To be sympathetic or empathetic with the joy of others. When somebody is happy, doing well, not to feel jealous, but just to feel happy for them. And then the equanimity, or upeksha, or upekha, that is the kind of thing that is different from indifference, where you don't care. Equanimity means to be able to withstand the different kinds of pairs of opposites, like gain and loss, or fame and blame, happiness and unhappiness, and to keep a kind of even mind towards it. Now, equanimity can be developed in different ways. It can come through meditation. In certain higher stages of meditation, there is a level called the fourth jhana, in which deep concentration and equanimity are the quality of your mind at that stage. But even that is probably a kind of conditioned state, but it is much better than not having equanimity, of course. And another way of developing equanimity is by realizing the changing nature of all these things, like gain and loss, happiness and unhappiness, and fame and blame. There is a nice Zen story, I should say a Chan story, because it is from China, where there were two Zen masters, two Chan masters. One was living on a small island in a hermitage, and the other one was living in a hermitage by the side of the lake, of that island lake. And the one living on the island thought that he was very, very well developed, and he thought he could withstand all the great winds. He says, even the 8 great winds cannot shake me. If I may try it in Mandarin, 这个大巴克 or Ching Chong Ping Pong, something like that. And he said he wrote it on a piece of scroll of, in Chinese calligraphy and sent it to the other Zen master. And the other one looked at it and he said, P. And P, for your information, the Chinese people already know this because that means F-A-R-T. That is a very small wind which usually comes out from behind, if it does. And so that was all he said. And he wrote one letter and sent it back to the other Zen master. And P, when he looked at it, the Zen master on the island blew up from anger. And then the other one said, well, if a small wind like that can shake you, what about the 8 great winds? And even Shakespeare, Shakespeare, to be or not to be, whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or by opposing end them, to die or to sleep, perchance to sleep. That kind of idea of to become, to be or not to be, to live or not to live, what would be the solution? Even, I think Hamlet was considering suicide as a kind of solution to the problem of dukkha, or suffering. But of course, the Buddha showed a different way out of suffering. He said by killing oneself and getting out of this life, there is really no end to suffering, because there is a continuation of a stream of consciousness that goes from life to life, and one only creates more suffering for oneself in the future and for others around one. So that is not the way out. And therefore the Buddha showed a way out by overcoming that ignorance. That is the main culprit he found out in his process of enlightenment, that actually shackled him to the samsara, or the ocean of existence, the ocean of birth, death and rebirth. It was this not seeing the things as they really are. And then just during his process of enlightenment, he had this chain of 12 conditioned links of together arising. I will not repeat them, but starting with from ignorance comes karmic formations. We create karma out of ignorance. Because of that, we need a body and mind to do these things. Because of the body and mind, we have these 6 senses, the 5 physical senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touch, and then the mind. And the Buddha said the mind is actually the forerunner of all things. Mano Pubhangama Dhamma Mano Setta Manomaya. The mind is the one that creates a lot of states, and because of the mind certain things will follow in our thoughts, in our words, and in our deeds. So therefore one has to guard the mind very much in order to, in the first place, to get to see the things for what they really are. As mentioned, the insight meditation, or vipassana as it is called, to see the things as they really are, in their changing nature. What we thought that is really solid and forever, like diamonds are forever, aren't they? Well, James Bond used to think so, but we have discovered that if you look at a diamond under an electronic microscope, it looks quite different. And there are all kinds of twirling particles and a lot of space in between those particles. And if you go down to the subatomic level, it will turn out to be just energy and condensation of vibrations and energy. So then, on the one hand, and that's also a very important distinction, the diamond is true. When we're talking about truth, the Buddha said there are actually different levels of truth. Yesterday and the day before, every time we hear the quotation from the speech, the famous speech in Oman camp by J. Krishnamurti, in August 1929, saying that truth is a pathless land and you cannot get there by any kind of method or technique, even organization. But then that truth, as far as I understood, is different from when the Buddha says there are different levels of truth. One is called the relative truth, the sammuti satya he called it. That is when we say, I am going, you are, your name is like this is my husband, this is my wife. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to recognize your own husband and wife if there was no me or self, or even a conventional use of the language. So that is true, but up to a certain extent. And then there's the deeper level, or the higher level of that truth, that there's actually no me, no self, no I. That is one of the characteristics in Buddhism, that it is called anatta vada. That is the doctrine of anatma, or non-self. But the Buddha also said, by yourself is evil done, by yourself good is done, you are the creator of your karma, you are also the receiver of the results of your karma. So there is a self, but on the other hand, he denied that there is an eternally unchanging, everlasting self in this stream of consciousness that we call me, mine, and my own. And therefore, Buddha is called an anatma vadi. He says, don't identify yourself even with what is called the unconditioned. He says, all things, the conditioned as well as the unconditioned, are non-self, not me, mine, my own, or myself. That's a little bit, not a little bit, very hard to realize, but if one does, that would be the way to liberation from the cycle of birth and death in this almost seemingly unending cycle of existence. Unless, of course, one takes the path of the Bodhisattva and chooses to remain in the cycle of birth and death in order to help as many beings as possible and to develop the good qualities or paramitas. But according to the Buddhist school to which I happen to belong, called Theravada, it is more practical to get out of this suffering and working on one's own salvation by following this, what is called the Eightfold Noble Path. But of course we should not see it as the path from A to B, or from Madras to Delhi, or some physical path, but rather as a way of living in which one can liberate oneself, maybe gradually, and there are schools which say it's not gradual, it is sudden, but the preparations only take so long till you suddenly see it. And the realization of the unconditioned probably is what is called a qualitative jump, and not a gradual jump, if that is possible. So therefore the preparations on the path, probably everybody has their own path, everybody does their preparations, and then in the end perhaps all the techniques and methods and even organizations may have to be at least psychologically abandoned in order to realize that which is beyond. Well, there are, of course, numerous aspects of Buddhism which I could mention, but the time is almost running out. I would just like to mention one more beautiful simile which we find in the Mahayana literature, and it's called Indra's net. It's different from the internet, but it's a little bit similar. Indra's net shows that how interdependent everything is in this universe, and it gives a picture of a tree, kind of a pine tree in the early morning in a cool, sort of moist climate. You see there are dewdrops at the end of every needle of the pine tree. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there are dewdrops, and when you look in one dewdrop you can see the whole tree and the environment reflected in that dewdrop. And in every other dewdrop, that dewdrop is also reflected, and all the other dewdrops, but all from different angles. And if you touch one dewdrop and it drops away, it sort of influences the whole constellation of these reflections in every dewdrop. So that is how important it is to guard our mind through being aware of what one is doing, what one is saying, and even what one is thinking, and the intention behind the thought. The Buddha said, Chetanahang bhikkhave kammang vadami. It is the chetana, or the intention, with which you do something which creates the karma. And if you are aware of what you're saying and doing, then you can avoid the unskillful and choose for the skillful. If you purify your mind, you come to the stages on the path where lobha, dosa and moha have been fully eradicated, then automatically one will not create any fresh karma, and one would be like a swan in the sky, leaving no trace behind. And the Buddha also said, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, in his own words, and those were his last words, and they will be my last words as well for this time. Appamadena sampadeta. Work out your own salvation or your liberation with diligence. Don't put off. Appramada. Don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. I wish you all peace and happiness and prosperity also for the new year.
On behalf of all here present, I heartily thank Venerable Orlandi Anandatira for a very full, insightful and learned lecture about Buddhism. He has given us a great deal to think about. For those members present, the next session here will take place at 7:30 p.m. this evening. It will be a slideshow about Adhyar, which will be of interest, no doubt, to people who are visiting Adhyar for the first time and for people who have visited before, because it also shows various aspects of the wildlife here which may not be immediately apparent. This session is now closed.
Give them the present.
அம்மா இல்லைங்க சுந்தரி மேம்
When a theosophist finds something of real worth, he must share it with others. That is, if you know, let others know becomes his way of life. So to help human beings for their spiritual progress is the highest aim of path of service and sacrifice. One more point about this spiritual ladder, we must remember that only when a theosophist finds something of real worth, he must share it with others. That is, if you know, let others know becomes his way of life. So to help human beings for their spiritual progress is the highest aim of path of service and sacrifice. One more point about this spiritual ladder, we must remember that
It's a wonderful audience. It's very nice of you to come away from the TV culture that we have nowadays and come and watch some live performances. It's a great opportunity even for us. So I'm sure you would understand if I say no videography is allowed. Mainly because our competition. It's a wonderful audience. It's very nice of you to come away from the TV culture that we have nowadays and come and watch some live performances. It's a great opportunity even for us. So I'm sure you would understand if I say no videography is allowed. Mainly because our competition.
Oh, you keep your shoes on or what? Oh, yeah.
Okay, sit down. Don't be naughty. Sit down.
He wants to go to the stage today.
Could you kindly rise for the universal prayer, please? O hidden life, vibrant in every atom.
O hidden life, vibrant in every atom.
O hidden light, shining in every creature.
O hidden light, shining in every creature.
O hidden love, embracing all in oneness.
O hidden love, embracing all in oneness.
May all who feel themselves as one with Thee
Each who feels himself as one with Thee,
know they are therefore one with every other. Please be seated and let us keep silent for about a minute or so.
sit down, sit down. Hey, sit down. Walker. Sit down.
Good morning, everyone. Respected International President Radha Ji and dear brothers and sisters, for this morning's program, I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce the speakers. There will be 3 speakers from 3 different countries. The first speaker is Marcos Luis Borges de Rezende, who is from Brazil and born in a Theosophical family. His grandfather attended Annie Besant's lectures in Sorbonne when he was 12 years old, joining the Theosophical Society very young, and he was Krishnamurti's translator when Kay had been to Brazil in 1935. His parents had met in Theosophical Society, and Marcos joined the TS when he was 10 years old. He was one of the leaders of the young Theosophical movement in Brazil, and now he is the National General Secretary in that country. He founded the Brazilian Theosophical Publishing House in 1988 and the Krishnamurti Study Center in 2002. Marcos is a lawyer and a university professor specialized in labor law. He is also judge of a court of elections in Brazil, named by the president of the country. May we invite Marcos to give his talk, please. Each of the speakers have about 15 minutes.
Dear President, Mrs. Rada Bonnier, dear Vice President, Mrs. Linda Oliveira, dear Chairman, brothers and sisters, I'm very happy to address you here in our international convention at Adyar. The biggest challenge in life is to understand it, not just intellectually, but in the essence of its movement of manifestation and retraction. Who am I? If I answer by my name, I will see that is merely a superficial record. If I think I am the body, I will realize that at some point, near or more distant, it is something that will inevitably disintegrate. All my knowledge, career, everything that has been acquired and accumulated over time will disappear at some moment in time. The psychological ego itself is a self-image that nature will also take care by erasing it. If I say I'm the higher self that reincarnates, this intellectual explanation does not make me different. One of the most beautiful things in life is to realize that I am nothing except a focus of observation of life, nature, manifestation, and relationships. Which place has love in such a complex movement called life? What is love? What is its nature? Love is one of the most important theosophical teachings for the spiritual path, maybe the most important. HPB said that theosophy is essentially altruism, and without love, it's not possible to be altruistic. The Dalai Lama said once that man is the son of compassion. In nature, animals generally require a certain maternal protection while they are young, but none of them depends as human beings while they are babies on the compassion from others, without which they would not survive. It's not difficult to see that love is an energy present in nature. When you see a beautiful flower filled with sand, the beauty of a baby squirrel, the most beautiful colors and sounds that manifest themselves, you will realize that love is always present if you have sensitivity to perceive it. Love is a widely used word for almost everything, and even advertising. The word, so often misrepresented by the human egocentrism, will never express the infinite energy that is love. In the words of Sri Ram, I quote, love for humanity, for each thing that exists, is the ruling passion of the adept. What characterizes him is a flaming altruism, a love which draws no boundaries and is focused upon every individual living being. It's a love to which everything else in life is subordinate. End quote. Why love is not present in our lives? Why is there no room for such contagious, aggregating, unifying, and beneficial energy which is love? The aridity of our lives derives from the simple fact that we are self-centered, continually focused on ourselves and our interests. Even when we try to leave this strictly personal sphere, we expand our center of interest to our family, our group of friends, our country, always expanding and reinforcing our egocentricity through a divisive and separatist mental attitude. We are not capable to see life without division in our minds, neither to observe its vast movement and the profound beauty and suffering it contains. As one of the Mahatmas, who were the real founders of the Theosophical Society, said, "Nature is devoid of goodness or badness. It follows the laws that have an antidote for each poison, a reward for every suffering. But we, human beings, do not understand the laws governing the material and the spiritual life, and live for ourselves or for our people, with interests always limited, and therefore we suffer. While the human consciousness, our consciousness, is self-centered, operating solely on the basis of personal interests, there will be no room for the endless and beneficial energy which is love. It will not find space for manifesting itself. Even in the Theosophical Society, which has its first object brotherhood, we are seeing how difficult it is to make it a reality due to our lack of love. Love your neighbor as yourself, said Jesus Christ. Be like the sandalwood which perfumes the axe that wounds it, said the Buddha. Is this a reality among us? Where is our love? A society like ours is a vast experimental field to know ourselves, to test our capacity to love. The first challenge, which is related to brotherhood, is always present, showing us how egocentrism degrades our relations in a contagious way. And if we want to regenerate them, we must perceive ourselves by seeing the division and the separatedness in our own minds. in order to break out of these disaggregating delusions. We are not perfect, but we must have sufficient self-perception to avoid that the forces which are present in our ego act against the laws of unity and harmony. Harmony does not mean equality or uniformity of thoughts, but absence of division or separation in our minds. When the differences are not taken in a personal way, they can expand our field of vision, enriching our comprehension. On the other hand, when we take them personally, we act against each other and cause a split. Is it possible, here and now, to die to all personal interests so that in this single moment love can manifest itself? Is it possible for us to embrace each other internally so that the deep affection touches ourselves and make us together channels for the most beneficial waters of life in order to benefit of the world? Dear brothers and sisters, let us awake to the perception that only by observing our own heart we will be capable of cleaning and purifying it from all egocentrism which has been accumulated for decades of self-centered and unconscious thoughts. Love and wisdom are two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. Love may show itself in a hard way, but it will always be beneficial and healing. Wisdom, in its turn, always brings a vision of the whole, of the unity behind all things, which is essentially love. Theosophy, which is wisdom, is also love. Love conquers all. This is a spiritual truth which governs the subtlest planes of nature. Our mission is to make this subtle energy get to the mental, to the astral, and to the physical planes in order to deeply transform our relations, which will be no more belligerent and selfish, but naturally true and affectionated. For this to happen, we must perceive ourselves, not allowing us to be fooled by all the tricks created by our thinking and by this pernicious and unconsciously nurtured thing called self-image. This wonderful thinking machine given us by nature cannot be allowed to be the greatest rulers of our lives. It exists only for practical things concerned with our civilized life. In order to allow the presence of love as a force that conquers all, that bring us closer to the center of life and allow us, united, to be channels of the most elevated blessings that can diminish human ignorance and suffering. We must know how to let this machine aside, quite, by calming down its instinctively divisive and speculative movement. Our dear Theosophical Society is a fertile field, an extremely useful space for learning about life and about ourselves, as well for the practical and effective exercise of brotherhood. But to make this a reality, we must perceive the divisive and pernicious thoughts present in our relations and radically change our attitudes. For us to be a light in the world, we must be united. Unity is not made with words, but with an inner attitude of sympathy, goodwill and love, with no barriers. Hatred does not cease with hatred. Hatred can only be extinguished by love. These are words of Lord Buddha. Likewise, antipathies and antagonisms are only overcome by a deep affection which chooses nothing, asks for nothing, does not judge, but simply love. Our dear Theosophical Society is already so brilliantly consolidated with regard to the lack of racial and religious prejudice. We must reflect on the personal prejudices that still affect us and that do much harm to our work. May we realize ourselves by observing our ego with its likes and dislikes, so we can leave them aside, making our relationships, not just in the TS, but wherever we are, healthy, harmonious, and deeply spiritual relations. When the self-centered living ceases, love begins to emerge as the morning sun, dispelling the darkness of unconsciousness and ignorance. And when this wonderful energy begins to rule our lives, everything changes. Without love, life is sterile, colorless, and scentless. We must die to the self with its array of egotistic interests by the perception of this self-centered mental structure in us, so that life can be simpler, with care for others, and with all that lives, with affection, respect, and deep comprehension. Without love, we are poor mortals who live without beauty, dying to the ego and opening ourselves to that energy that permeates everything and that keeps the universe alive and united. We are life itself, a blossom in nature. I close with the wise words of St. Paul. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not love, I am become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcos. We could feel the love. And the theme being, without loving care, I am nothing. The next speaker is Svitlana Gavrilenko from Ukraine. Svitlana Gavrilenko was born in 1946 in Kiev, Ukraine. She holds a PhD, is assistant professor in mathematics, in the probability theory, and a high school teacher, now retired. She is the head of the organizing committee of annual International Kiev Forum, Spiritual Development for Man and Society. She is the head of the council of the Committee for Ethics and Humanitarian Expertising. She's been a TS member since 2000, and she is the president of the Ankh Lodge in Kiev. Svitlana.
Respected Mrs. President Radarji, respected Vice President Ms. Linda Olivero, dear Chairman, dear co-speakers, dear brothers and sisters, it is a great privilege for me to speak now and here about the loving care. Our world is beautiful and perfect in its harmony. It was cared by the loving mind, so all creatures, starting with every smallest subatomic particle and ending with the whole universe, demonstrates this loving diligence, attention, great care and wisdom. At the same time, today's world is drastically suffering from lack of love, understanding, patience, sympathy and compassion. Every living creature is suffering. The terra firma itself is growing with pain, but the human beings are suffering most of all. Injustice and cruelty, wars and famine, despair and lack of trust. So, what's the root of the problem and how to reverse the existing trend? For several thousand years of evolution, the human kingdom has been developing in a perfect harmony with nature and all other beings on our planet. There were enough of gifts of nature to sustain the life, while the creative activity of humans was not yet capable to compete with the power of nature and did not deplete natural resources or recreational potential of the planet. In the past few centuries, the situation began to change. Human mind has unraveled several mysteries of nature and focused man's effort on exploiting the resources of the planet for satisfaction of own needs. It seems normal that the planet must provide resources to meet the increased needs of a man. However, the introduction of new energy-consuming technologies on one hand and reckless wastefulness, rampant consumerism in using the riches of nature, and lack of foresight, on the other hand, have changed the balance on Earth by a great extent. Today, it is the mankind who makes the decision concerning the fate of our planet due to the development of human intellect. Man has acquired unprecedented, enormously powerful ability to modify and control many natural processes. However, after having acquired such huge strength and power, people do not accept their responsibility, and they are acting irresponsibly. Not always the recreational forces of nature succeed to cope with anthropogenic impacts. Men show permissiveness, willfulness, and disrespect for the law of balance in nature. As a result, mankind became a source of imbalance, of the depletion of resources of our planet, and of irreversible changes in all our other realms of nature. So, what outcome results from this situation we can realistically expect? If we wait for our planet to self-regulate this process and do not take any steps towards a change, then ultimately we will reach the point where the forces of nature throw us like a parasitizing tribe off the body of the planet, and the mankind will start learning to live anew from the very beginning, caveman stage of human civilization. It's quite obvious that today an effective change can be brought in not by natural forces, but the man. Furthermore, an assumption that one day a government will issue a law which would be binding people to love and help each other, care for environment and for future of our planet, looks quite unrealistic and even comical. And even if such a government existed, who could have made people to obey such a law? That's why it's perfectly clear that the real changes should occur inside every single human being. The true revolution originates from within. It is evolving from the divine source which is hidden in every human being. How does this happen, and what serves as a trigger for such an internal unfoldment? Suffering, search, feelings, many lives full of experience and work. All these are preparing the ground for awakening the man to the truth and light, to love and joy. And finally, that drastic moment comes when someone's phrase or a book or a contact with the beauty of the nature or art suddenly open a certain inland door, the door leading into the inner temple, the temple of the soul. And then the inner light illuminates all human life. The warmth of life gradually melts the ice of cold intellect, and we start experiencing new relations with the outside world. At first, person's near environment is put in order and became harmonized. Person's life became more serene and less self-centered. New, previously unknown life pleasures are discovered, and a person starts shifting his focus from personal sorrow and suffering to those of others people. We start feeling concerned about the fate of other beings and the troubles of our relatives and friends, the problems of global, universal, and planetary scale. It isn't so easy to learn to understand the needs of our relatives and friends, our closest circle of people. This can be achieved only based on our personal experience of loving connection, our attempts to encompass, to sympathize. It's not so easy to learn compassion and also a sympathetic joy in the happiness of other living beings. And it's even harder to learn how to choose action strategy in accordance with the new opportunities. At the beginning, our actions are often awkward and clumsy. Our attempts to help others after in-depth analysis are proven to be selfish, and people to whom they are addressed may feel confused and reject them. Sometimes we lose heart from our importance, but certain inner force encourages us to look again for ways to help others and to influence the troubling circumstances which we would like to change. It is only our personal experience in observing the results of our actions that may teach us to choose the appropriate action strategy. Who knows how many lives one needs to live in order to understand that the evil can't be defeated by evil, that aggression can't be suppressed by aggression, and that there is only one way to bring in a real and radical change. This is the path of love. So, through living several lives, by practicing love, we gain wisdom, and by practicing wisdom, we find love. This way, we are moving up the evolution spiral and gradually recognize an essence of the great creative ideation. There comes a time when we make a surprising discovery. It turns out that to give is much more pleasant than to take. We discover that when you are giving, your wealth, your personal treasure becomes multiplied. Of course, that treasure is our soul treasure. We begin to understand how much this world needs our inner wealth, our loving care. This amazing revelation changes our values, rebuilds our life, and multiplies our powers. Now, we have to learn how to give ourselves out to the surrounding world, and this is quite an important art. We love to love without being excessively sentimental, to be useful while not obtrusive, to be always ready to forgive while able to determine sensitively the appropriate extent of your help, to offer a bait but not a fish. This requires a great quality of recognition. Today, indeed, the most urgent task for those who are ready for such giving is to learn how to do so. Essentially, every thought, every word, every deed should be born by the impulse of self-giving, the love care, no matter what the care may concern. Mastery of such a state of high-level quality, for it implies mastery of all the energies of microcosm and the achievement of the natural state of kinship, connection, communion with all that exists. One day, after many victories and failures, attempts and achievements, we start pondering over ultimate goal of man's evolution, over lessons we learn behind the scene of tangled scenarios of our many lives. And with surprise and joy we realize that the purpose of the great creative ideation is to find love and wisdom. Gradually, the meaning of our existence is revealing self to our inner sight. Again and again, we're trying to improve ourselves in our ability to understand the true essence of what happens around in order to direct the expression of our loving compassion at increasing the goodness and justice, trust and concordance, harmony and creativity, love and mutual understanding. We learn to fit into the harmony of the universe in such a way which would allow us to become the conductors, the channels of divine will, divine love and wisdom, divine power. Finally, we became aware of the fact that after having been freed from our internal constraints, from our selfish ambitions, we gain true freedom and power, and the wider sphere of influence become available to us. And the most important point that we realized is that all these things have always been with us. They were folded inside us in a secret treasury to which we could not reach for a long time. Neither did not we know how to approach it, nor where the keys were kept, or how the secret word should be pronounced. The greatest help on this path we receive from our teachers, the masters, since they are examples of such loving care, tireless self-sacrifice and self-renunciation. And what brings us into their circle is a deep inner realization of the great truth that without loving care, I am nothing. Let's imagine a happy world in which such people live. Is not it a universal brotherhood? That's where the solution of current problems of mankind lies. We are here today precisely because we have set this goal and are bringing it closer by our joint creative work. Blessed each small step that leads to the summit. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Svetlana. I hope that there will never be a government that will forbid us to love each other and to help each other, in which case I might think of intergalactic reincarnation. Get out of this place. The next speaker is Abraham Oron from Israel. He is the president of the Covenant Lodge in Israel. He is a university graduate in economics and political science and a student of Theosophy since 1978, and also the chairman of the Tel Aviv Lodge since 1985. And also he is the editor of the Israeli Theosophical magazine Or, which means light. He's the author of 3 theosophical compilations in Hebrew, The Way of Light, Opening a Window to Occultism, and Illuminating Various Subjects in Occultism. We look forward to Abraham's talk.
Brothers, sisters, I would like to start with a very general statement that every human being longs for love, wants to be loved. We are all strongly drawn to those who love us and to those we love. As students of Theosophy, the love of others is one of our most inspiring ideas. But why? Why is love so hard for us? Why is it so difficult for us to feel closeness? Because this is which is really love, this closeness, warmth, caring, fondness, brotherhood, and compassion for others, even sometimes for those within our own families. Theosophy teaches that we all are sparks of the same flame, and each person's soul has a divine source. Intellectually, we can accept that we are all brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of the same eternal essence that dwells within each one of us. But when it comes to living, most of us can express deep care and warmth to quite very few of those we meet in our daily lives. The answer may be found in this beautiful pearl of wisdom known as Light on the Path. In its second part, it says, Look for the song of life. Look for it and listen to it first in your own heart. At first you may say, it is not there. When I search, I find only discord. Look deeper. If again you are disappointed, pause and look deeper again. There is a natural melody, an obscure found in every human heart. It may be hidden over and utterly concealed and silenced, but it is there. At the very base of your nature, you will find faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, hope and love in our inner nature. For me it means that you cannot love others if you do not find the source of love in yourself. It also means that we can not find that source of love which is in our inner self, in our spiritual soul, if we are not willing to look inward. And looking inward can be difficult because we may encounter our lower self of that which is unpleasant, that which causes discord within us. Light on the Path describes this state when it says, when you have found the beginning of the way, the star of your soul will show its light, and by its light you will perceive how great is the darkness in which it burns. Mind, heart, brain, all are obscure and dark. I believe that our inner self, who is also our inner teacher, and maybe some call it the beloved in us, want us to see the truth about ourselves, about our personality, about our motives, about our selfishness and anger and fear. Can we look inside and see all these things without judgment? Just see what we hold inside and feel the suffering which is connected with such attitudes? This willingness to look inside is the beginning of freedom from that which is separating us from our divine self, who is the source of love within us. Yes, it is so true that without loving care we are nothing. But we cannot really love and care for others if there is a gap inside us, separating us from the source of love within. We all need love. We all exist because of the love of those who cared for us when we were young and weak. Everyone experienced the strength that a loving smile or look or touch can give. The whole creation is held together by the bond of divine love and compassion. Rabindranath Tagore expresses this in a beautiful way. Love is the only reality, and it is not a mere sentiment. It is the ultimate truth that lies in the heart of creation. And the voice of silence says it maybe even more beautifully. Canst thou destroy divine compassion? Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. All the beauties of nature are the result of the care and nurturing love of infinite number of invisible intelligences who are operating in the inner side of nature. Personally, I believe that you cannot create beauty without love. Even the law of karma, with all its strictness and sometimes hardness, is the outcome of divine love, which shows every one of us, sometimes through pain, that we deviate from the path that leads to a lasting peace and happiness. This love and tenderness of God for His creation is expressed in Tagore's Gitanjali. And he says, "Here is thy footstool, and the rest thy feet, where live the poorest and lowliest and lost. When I try to bow to thee, my obeisance cannot reach down to the depth where thy feet rest, among the poorest, the lowliest, and lost. Pride can never approach to where thou walkest in the clothes of the humble, among the poorest, and lowliest, and lost. My heart can never find its way to where thou keepst company with the companionless, among the poorest, the lowliest, and the lost." Yes, we all need to be loved and cared for. But sometimes we are stuck in this wish to be loved and forget that we are here in order to develop our ability to love, without which we can never be really happy in our life. Without loving care for others, our life feels valueless and meaningless. The essence of love, which is closeness and connection, has its source in the ability to listen from one's depth, and to sense the depth of the other